My name's Bobby Coyle. My name's Bobby Coyle. I'm an alcoholic. And it's strange with everyone being muted, like you can't hear the feedback. So be it. My home group is the Franklin Town Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. We meet at 2044 Fairmount Avenue, right across the street from the Eastern State Penitentiary. At Wednesday night at 6:30, we have a speaker meeting. On this afternoon, on Saturday afternoons at 5:30, we have a big book meeting. And Sunday morning at 9:30, we have a step meeting, with the last Sunday of the month being a tradition meeting. If you're ever in the neighborhood, please stop by. We'd love to have you. I'd like to thank Daryl and the group for inviting me. It's funny. I look at some pictures. I did get sober. I was in my 20s. I had brown hair. Now I have white hair. And my next birthday, I'll be 60. And I said, where did the time go? It's just amazing. And just very briefly, though, I guess I got to qualify a little bit. I grew up in the city, large family, large Irish Catholic. I realize that's redundant when you say that, but I had 7 brothers and sisters. There was 8 kids in a 10.5-year span, and we lived in a small 3-bedroom row home, and I never felt a part of. Both sets of my grandparents were immigrants, so they knew the way to make it in a country was by education. So they made a great deal of sacrifice to provide that education to me and my siblings. I went to a private school where I always felt different. I didn't feel part of most of the kids who went to the school from affluent families from the suburbs. And even though it was an exclusive school, it was in inner city. And I used to walk to this school, me and a couple of guys from the neighborhood. And because it was a lot of the kids, their first introduction to the inner city. So they didn't look down. They looked down on us, and they thought we were kind of, they thought we were shaming. And I understand where they were coming from. But we took advantage of that, and we intimidated them, and we burglarized their lockers as their parents were dropping them off in their luxury automobiles. We sold football pools, and if they hit, we wouldn't pay off. And if you wanted to buy a particular substance, we sold you a substitute substance. I tell people we went through more oregano than a pizzeria. We thought we were gangsters. We were idiots. That's what we were, and we took advantage of these kids. But again, always doing things on my gut I didn't feel comfortable doing. Like one of my nicknames was Crazy Coyle, and I was like your entertainment committee, and I knew about it. I knew that by the values instilled in me by the nuns as a kid and by my parents, but the need for me to be accepted by you outweighed anything else. And I compromised values and principles from the very first start. And when it came time to graduate from the prep, I really had no desire to further my education, and I knew I couldn't stay home because to be held to catch. And I'm 17 and my options are limited, so I enlisted in the service. And that wasn't popular, and I'm not going to talk politics. You should never talk politics, but I just want to set the scene. It's the 70s. Vietnam had just ended a couple years before. The draft was over. The military was not a popular option. Jimmy Carter was the president when I enlisted, but that's what I did. I enlisted in the service, and that's where my drinking really took off. I need to back up for a moment. So my drinking was occasionally in high school, was on the weekends. There is only one reason I did not drink during the week. I wasn't allowed out on school nights. That's the only reason I didn't drink. I drank on the weekends. And so then, and after I graduated, I went down to Wildwood for the traditional 1 week of the senior week. And then right after senior week, the next week, I was in the Air Force. And after all my training in which I remained sober, I got sent overseas. And that's where my drinking really took off, And when I was on duty, I was squared away. And when I was off duty, I wasn't squared away, and signs are on the walls, but, I ignore everyone, I drink. There's just lots of things, just a lot of pain. And drinking helps me not to deal with it, because I don't deal with it. I just bury it, and not to feel it, I was overseas, and I was off duty one day. However, several of my friends, for some reason, we got split up at that particular day for an assignment, and they wound up getting killed. And I suffer from tremendous amount of survivor's guilt. I didn't know how to, there was help extended to me. I told everyone I was fine, but I just kept it at bay, and I really hit it hard. I didn't distinguish myself in the Air Force, but I didn't do badly either. I did my job, and that was it. No trouble. No recognition, good recognition, bad recognition, no recognition. I just went to skate along. My enlistment was up. I came home. I went to St. Joe's as an undergrad, and same thing, not making the deans and not found out either, and drinking, small classes, 15, no more than 20 kids in the class. That would be a large class. I would go whenever I wanted to go, I wasn't an active participant, doing enough to keep the heat off my back, and it was the end of the spring semester, and it was in May, and it was an unusually warm day, and the guy from the neighborhood called me up. He said, Bobby, the Phillies are playing tomorrow. It's one of these businessman specials, like a mid-afternoon, midweek game. He said, you want to go to the game? I said, sure. I'm not an active participant in the classroom. So I cut class. We're at the top of that 700 level, drinking that cheap, watered-down beer, and the sun's beating down on me, and I'm getting kind of trashed. And I told the guys, I said, you know what? I said, I'm going to run down in the field and meet one of the players. And they kind of shrugged me off because another nickname I had was Bullshit Bob. I lied about everything. I need to tell you, I'm as Irish as Paddy's pig. You can see that, right? I lied about my ethnic heritage. In my neighborhood, there were various social clubs, right? And one of them was a Ukrainian American social club, the Yuki Club. And most of these social clubs are really nothing but speakeasies. For some reason, I don't know why, I wasn't questioned. I volunteered this information. But I told the bartender, I said, my mother's Ukrainian. I forget all about it. So about a month later, I come in with my brother Brian, and we're in there drinking. And then he comes on duty. He says, it's Bobby the Yuki. My brother, his head snapped around. He looked at me and said, what the hell did you tell this guy? I said, I don't know. I don't think I've ever been in here before. But it was just, I lied about stuff that I had no business lying about. I lied when I was better suited to tell the truth. But I need to tell you, my self-esteem and sense of self was so lacking, and I was a chameleon. Like in Philly, and I think a lot in big cities, you hang on corners and you're allied with a particular corner for probably the rest of your life. But I would bounce around with different corners because it was the fear of letting anybody in, for letting them know who I really was. There was like safety in the distance, and that would carry into my recovery, So back to the bowl game. I'm at the 700 level. I sneak down. The Phillies are playing at the Vet Stadium. It's been closed many years. They blow it up. And we used to have these picnic areas in the left field and the right field corners. And the San Diego Padres were in town. And Dave Winfield was the right fielder for the Padres. And before I knew it, I jumped over the fence. And I'm in center field before I realized what I had done. But by then, you got to finish, right? So I run out, and he's in right field, and I shake his hand. I say, hey, Dave, how you doing? He looked at me, and he was a big dude. He said, brother, what are you doing out here? And from behind him, I saw the guards coming. I said, Dave, I got to go now. So I start running towards the infield, and I want to slide into second base. I don't know why. I just thought that'd be a pretty cool thing to do, like I might claim, right? So, but I was running towards second base, and there was more guards coming from the third base side, and I knew I couldn't do that. So I turned around, and I start going towards first base. And I'm like slow trot, and I'm probably about maybe 10 feet away from the guy. And I was like walking slowly to give myself up. But the last second, I deked the guy and ran out in the outfield. Now I'm running around like a screwball. It seems like 10 minutes, but it's closer to 2 or 3, right? But the guards, these young, short, fat guys from South Philly, they were tripping over each other. It's like Keystone Cops, right? The place is going nuts. I swear to God, they put Mr. Excitement up on the scoreboard. I'm running around. Well, I got nowhere to go. The fence is 12 feet high. I'm drunk. I'm out of breath. I'm actually about to get sick. So I just stopped running. And I wait out in center field, and they come take me off the field. I'm surrounded by, 6, 8 guys, and the place is going nuts. I got a standing ovation from 37,000 people. It was just great. And they take me up through the right field bullpen, and Tug McGraw was in the bullpen for the Phillies, and the Tugger gave me the thumbs up. I like to think the Tugger had a few that day because he had a reputation for knocking them back. But the place was going nuts. Now, I knew I was going to get a beating from these guards because I made them look so stupid. And I was okay with that. I actually pictured this. I would be a legend in the neighborhood. I figured by the time I get out of jail, I'd be back in the neighborhood. I could walk into the bar, the shot glasses would be set up in front of me, and I could drink for free off this story for at least a week. Now, bullshit, Bob, this is a story I make up, but I had 4 guys from the neighborhood who had my back. And just as I was about to get my beating, the Philadelphia police lieutenant, he showed up. He said, "What's the matter with you?" He said, "Are you drunk? Are you high?" I said, "No, I'm just happy. I just got out of service and I'm just happy to be here. I had just taken a couple civil service exams. I'm just happy to be here." And he looked at me, he said, "Well, you better get your happy ass out of this stadium." So not only did he save me from getting beaten, but he also saved me from getting arrested, which is, God has a sense of humor, because it was no more than 8 to 10 weeks afterwards, I got hired by the Philadelphia Police Department. I know. They were hiring anybody back then. Now, I tell that story for a couple different reasons. One, it's the only funny story I got. I wasn't a funny guy. I was a liar. I was a thief. I was a cheat. I was a violent drunk. I wasn't trustworthy. I wasn't dependable. I was just out of my mind, cared about getting loaded. And if you got my way, shame on you. Secondly, it's a true story. Those 4 guys, 2 of them now are sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, you know. And 3, I guess, maybe more importantly, I forgot a lot about my drinking. I was a blackout drinker, and I never knew what they were. I was in the VA hospital where I spent 6 months. I got sober, and the doctor came up to me and said, "Listen, do you ever have any blackouts?" I said, "Nope." I must have answered too quickly. He said, "Do you know what they are?" I said, "Nope." And once he described them, I said, "All the time." I thought that was normal. I thought everyone drank that way. Like Thursday was payday. Friday, I'd wake up, there'd be like 5 crinkled ones and like 3 quarters on the dresser. Like, where did I park my car? What's your name? I mean, I just thought that was normal. I thought everyone did that, you know? Thank God for blackouts. So it was just, you know, my life just it went downhill quickly, you know, and so I was working, and my immediate supervisor pulled me off to the side one day. He said, "You know what, kid? You're smart and you're going to go places, but that booze is going to mess you up. In one ear and out the other." My uncle, who was a boss on the job, I was at a family function one night. He pulled me off to the side. He said, "Bobby, I'm hearing stories about you. You're going to get yourself in a jackpot. You better slow down." In one ear and out the other. And several years later, after getting sober, I ran 2 separate occasions. I ran into my uncle and that supervisor in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I realized at that point that they were trying to 12-step me. And I remember going up to my uncle and saying, "Yo, Uncle, how come you didn't tell me?" And he just gave me one of them old-timer smiles and said, "Bobby, you weren't ready yet." Which just goes to show you that all the drinking and all the nonsense that went with it were necessary for me to hit my bottom, you know? And I knew I had a problem. I really did. But it would come fleeting. I said, "No, it can't be." And, you know, and I wound up doing, it was just crazy. And I wound up starting doing this other type of work, and I thought I needed to maintain some sort of illusion. So now that I'm drinking on the job, I would never do this. And I was put in a position where I thought that I needed to do other substances, and I would never do this. I had a particular opinion about people who did other substances. But one night, under the influence of alcohol, my judgment was impaired. I was in a position where I thought I needed to do other substances, and I did. And now I'm off to the races. And my use of other substances is very brief, a little over a year, 13, 14, 15 months at the tops. And out of the respect to the fifth tradition, that's why I need to talk about that stuff. But please feel free to use your imagination. But that's where alcohol took me. You know, I had a very strong belief about a particular issue, but drinking compromised that belief, and it compromised everything. I had no values on nothing. And I really had no friends. I mean, towards the end of my drinking, I couldn't even buy people. Like, I would call people up and say, "Yo, I'm going out tonight." You want to go? "Oh, no, I can't go. I'm broke." I said, "Don't worry about it. I got you covered." They said, "Oh, no, Bobby, I can't go." They didn't even want to hang out with me anymore because of the type of person I was, because I would I'd be happy-go-lucky for a little bit. Throw that switch, and I was just nuts, punching people with bottles and, just crazy nonsense, I'm sitting home from work one day. I'm reading an article. There's in the Daily News, and at the end of the article, there's a series of questions, and then it said alcohol problems, drug problems, marital problems, depression, thoughts of suicide. I was 4 out of 5 because I was single, and I'm sure if I was married, I'm batting 1,000. And I talk about you talk about the moment of clarity. As soon as it came, it quickly left. But something made me cut that article out. I stuck it in my wallet, and I continued on drinking. I was, it just got ugly after that. I wound up running a kid over in a car, in a city vehicle, and I got out of my car with the intent to beat this kid with my nightstick because I thought he was going to milk me or the city for an insurance claim. And that guy that is what prevented me from doing that. But I threw this kid off the hood of my car. I pulled his crumpled bicycle from underneath my car so I can drive on. I drove back to the bar and made some sort of smart aleck remark, and I continued on drinking. That doesn't even begin to describe the ugliness that I was. I was just an ugly dude, man. And in all areas of my life, I had nothing, and I was just violent, and I was just nasty, and the way I spoke to people, the way I treated people, and I was just really a miserable human being, So I checked into a hotel with the intentions to consume with some booze and some other substances, with the courage to consume all this stuff to build up the courage to end my life. That was my plan. And, I must have only had money for a few days because they're knocking on the door to kick me out. And, I was suspended from my job, so I didn't have access to my weapons, so I couldn't shoot myself. The booze is gone. The other substances are gone. So I go over to the window, and I open up the window, and I jump out the window to end my life. And I open up the window. I was on the 5th floor, and I remembered I was scared of heights. I made 23 jumps in the service. I never overcame my fear of heights. So, it was just a pitiful existence. So I got in my car, and I took a last spin through the neighborhood. I went to see the corner I hung on where I went to school, and I wanted to end my life in an automobile accident. And thank God that didn't happen. But I'm coming down the East River Drive and want to go into oncoming traffic. I knew that would do the trick. But then something hit me, and I know this is not me. I knew I couldn't do that because I would hurt someone, an innocent family, I would destroy. But that's not me thinking. I realize now that was God interfering in my life. And so I didn't do that, but I decided I was still in pain. I figured I'd wrap myself around one of these trees. And at the end of the East River Drive is Boathouse Row, and I threw my car up on the sidewalk, and I just sobbed like a baby. And then I reached into my glove box where I always had an extra gun. The gun wasn't there, but in my glove box was my wallet, and inside that wallet was was the article that I had clipped out of the Daily News about 3 or 4 weeks before. And this is no longer there, but at the end of the last boathouse is one of these old glass enclosed phone booths. And I dialed the phone number up on this article, and I spoke to this woman who answered the phone. I spoke to this lady like I spoke to no one in my life before. I told her the truth. I told her everything was going on in my life, and believe me, I was in bad shape, and I was crying. And God bless her. And she listened patiently. When I got done, she said, "Listen, why don't you drive over to Hahnemann Hospital? Someone will talk to you." And that was maybe a 5-6 minute drive. I go over there, and they were there, and they admitted me to their 10th floor of their psychiatric unit. They kept me there for 3 days and got me kind of stabilized. And from there, I got transferred to the VA hospital out in West Philadelphia. And I spent about 6 weeks in their flight deck. And from there, I was eventually transferred to the VA hospital out in Coatesville, where I would spend another few weeks in their flight deck before I got put into the alcohol and drug ward. When I pulled over that day and made that phone call, Alcoholics Anonymous was the furthest thing from my mind. I didn't think I was an alcoholic because I was a beer drinker, and you can't be an alcoholic drinking beer. I mean, the only time I drank hard liquor was like on New Year's Day, St. Patty's Day, or payday, but I was a beer drinker, and really, beer is really not alcohol. So, so there's no way I could be an alcoholic. I thought my problem was the short use of other substances. If I left that crap alone, I'd be okay. Maybe I got this mental illness that my mother had, and maybe I inherited that. Maybe I got this stress disorder that I have. I got this from the job. I got this from the service. Maybe it's the neighborhood I live in. Maybe it's the fact that I'm a mummer. I don't know, but I can't be alcohol. I just couldn't. I knew what alcoholics were. Alcoholics and drug addicts were these poor people I was dealing with on the streets of North Philadelphia day in, day out. They had the problem, not me, you know. So when I got in the VA hospital out in Coatesville, when I got put in the alcohol and drug ward, it's the first time in probably about maybe 8 to 10 weeks, closer to 10 weeks, that there were handles on both sides of the door. And it's amazing how quickly the arrogance comes back into a guy like me. So I'm scouting the lay of the land, you got to check it out. And I wander into the day room. And in the day room, they're up on the wall, they have the large window shades of the 12 steps and the 12 traditions. And I zip through those steps. I got about half of them done, as you can imagine. I get down to the amends. They're screwed. Not my neighborhood. No amends. That's a sign of weakness. That's not a sign of strength. That ain't happening. But later that night, 2 men came up, and I would later find out that they were part of the treatment facility. I did not know that then. I would find out that later. And the moment that the speaker said something about his background that I didn't like, didn't identify with, couldn't relate to, I'd immediately tune him out. I was too busy listening to the messenger and not the message. Now I'm looking around at my peers, and I realized the decision to do something about my drinking was definitely premature. I mean, you got to pick. I mean, first of all, they're all older guys, right? I mean, I'm in my 20s. I mean, they're 30s, 40s. Christ, there may have been someone in their 50s. Oh, my God, what am I doing here? And guys, a lot of them had serious drug issues, and that wasn't me. And these guys had employment issues, a lot of Vietnam vets, and that wasn't my issue. And guys had wives who hated them and kids they couldn't see. I didn't have that issue, because no kids, no, marriage. They had, no employment issues. I've only had one job. I went to the Air Force to the city of Philadelphia, where I'm still employed. Looking for the differences and not the similarities. But without question, what bothered me the most was at the end of the meeting, when everyone got in a circle and held hands and said the Lord's Prayer. If this is what you people are about, I definitely didn't want nothing to do with you. I hated God. And there were lots of different reasons I hated God. And one of the reasons I hated God was my mom's mental illness. And that's unfortunate. I mean, we don't even talk about it today, but back in the 60s, we definitely weren't talking about it, I now realize, my mom had 8 children in a 10-and-a-half-year span. Christ, no wonder she had some sort of disorder, and I didn't know what that disorder was, but I knew that she spent a lot of time in hospitals and psychiatric wards and medication, and I was just completely embarrassed by her. And I came home from high school one day. I was 15 years old, and I found my mother in the basement, and she had slit her wrist, and she looked up at me. She said, "Bobby, help me." And I looked down at her. I said, "Good for you." And I walked out of the house. So that happened. I was 15. I would drink for the next, however many years. I got sober at 27. And that's 12 years of hating God. It'd be a few more years before I would even address this issue. And so I'm not holding hands and I'm not saying prayers. But I now know what they said. I know they said it. They said, "For those who care to join." However, because of my misdirected resentment, I could not respect your right to pray. And I kicked a chair and I make noise and I wouldn't hold hands. And I just, that's just the way it was. When I was about to get discharged, a nurse came up. She had to be a member of Al-Anon. She was just a beautiful lady. And she saw all through my BS. And that's all it was just BS to keep people at arm's length, as a defense mechanism. She came up to me. She said, "The only way you're going to make it, you're going to need to go to Alcoholics Anonymous." And I need to tell you, that's the best piece of advice I would get. And that's where I would get my recovery. I got my recovery in AA. I didn't get it at the VA hospital, but they helped me tremendously. Drained the oil, they tightened the bolts. They hooked me up. But I would get my recovery in AA. And I would go to AA every single day, sometimes a couple times a day, I don't drink coffee. I've never had in my life to this day. I've never had a cup of coffee, so I don't make it. Just the type of guy that I am. I don't smoke cigarettes. I have never smoked a cigarette in my life, so I don't empty any ashtrays. I know that's not a big deal. 30 years ago, that was a service commitment, ashtrays. So I'm not doing that. Big book meeting or step meeting, strictly by accident. I would leave it to break. I had something more important to do. Tradition meetings, absolutely not. Don't like them. They're rules. Don't like rules. Rules for other people. They don't apply to me. I'm interested in war stories. That's what I want to hear. And the moment that someone said something about his background that I didn't like, couldn't relate to, or didn't identify with, I would immediately tune him out. Too busy listening to the messenger, not the message. But I was a meeting maker, and I was crazy as a bedbug. I was just nuts. I was sitting in his bar one day because they sold real good roast beef. Nick's roast beef, the best in the city. Now, that's what I would have told you back then. The truth was, the reason I was at that bar, towards the end of my drinking, there was a lot of negative publicity about me. And I said, oh, don't believe the headlines. That's not me. That's my brother Brian. That wasn't me. I'm back. Things are cool. That's why I was in the bar, because the arrogance comes back quickly. A couple guys in the neighborhood come in. They think it's necessary to knock me down a peg or two because of my arrogance. And I can understand where they're coming from. The one guy just stood a little too close to me, and I stood up and I punched him in the face. However, I was holding a rock glass at the time. I opened him up. He dropped like a bag of rocks. He bled like a pig. The cops came. I knew one of the guys. I worked with him, and I could still see the look of disgust in his eyes because he asked what happened, and I give him my version. He just looks at me, says, "You know what? You're nuts. You better get the hell out of here." And I'm making regular tens of meetings, and this is why I'm living. My home group, it was my 1 year anniversary. At that time, my group, you would speak on your anniversary. We do it differently now. I got done speaking. It was amazing. It was miraculous. The blind could see, the lame walked. There was thunderous applause. It was like confetti and sunshine and unicorns, all types of stuff. And people came up and they patted me in the back, saying, "Way to go, Bobby! You're doing so good." And I was dying inside. I identified myself as an alcoholic because that's what the group conscience was, but I didn't believe it. In fact, during my story, a bottle of beer appeared in my head, but you guys want to hear that. You want to hear all the quotes. And one of the advantages of getting sober young, I didn't fry all the cells, so I was able to give you information. I'm sure I sounded like the second coming of Bill Wilson, but I was just dying inside, 23 months sober, I beat another man with a baseball bat. I used to flippantly say, I forget what step I was working that day, but I realized when I was making that flippant remark, it takes away the ugliness of the event. I beat another human being with a baseball bat, stone cold sober. It was just horrible. My second anniversary came and went. I didn't celebrate it. 1 month after my second anniversary, I wanted to eat my gun. The same pathetic I had before, but 25 months before, I'm loaded with drugs and alcohol. Here I am, stone cold sober in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was a liar, thief, and a cheat. I want to take my life. Did I say I didn't have a sponsor? You got to figure that one out. So I go to a meeting at Wissonomin Friday night, and there's a guy from my neighborhood, Troubles. That's a hard-earned nickname. And Bobby and I, he's older than me, but we grew up in the same neighborhood. But he was in and out of jail in the 60s and 70s, and he was nuts. I mean, Troubles, you get a heart. That's a nickname, Troubles. That just sums it up. And so he was sober. He was sober when I came in. So I saw him at this meeting this night. I go up after him after the meeting. I said, Bobby, I need some help. I said, would you be my sponsor? He looked me dead in the eye. He said, Bobby, I've been watching you these past couple of years, and I'm sticking my chest out. Yeah, he kind of likes me. He says, I need to tell you, you're full of shit. That's not the response I'm looking for. He says, I will be your sponsor under certain conditions. You're going to call me every single day. You're going to go to a big book meeting. You're going to go to a step meeting. You're going to go to a men's meeting. You're going to leave them damn women alone, and you're going to get yourself a coffee commitment. And I'm talking to myself, who's he talking to? I'm sober 25 months. I'm selling the grapevines. I got it going on. So what I did do, I said, okay, So my neighborhood was getting gentrified at the time. You know how yuppies come in, ruin things, take abandoned warehouses and convert them into loft apartments and things like that. So the meetings in the neighborhood were converting too. So there were a lot of yuppies and not many neighborhood people. So, but Bobby, and I was running around the yuppies. I was terrorizing. I was being an idiot. That's what I was doing. And he knew that. So even though I never heard him curse, he certainly didn't have a problem using some colorful language towards me. He used language that I understood. And so he took me back to his house that night. He introduced me to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. We went to the first 3 steps. Actually, what we did, we got on our knees and said the 3rd step prayer. And I need to tell you, this is not what I want to do. I didn't have an experience. I still hated God. But the one thing I did know, I knew that I was safe with him, because I knew the way he lived, and he wasn't living that way anymore. It just wasn't in the rooms of AA. It was in the neighborhood. Anyone, well, I shouldn't say it. I could stay sober and sound good in an hour a day, but what about the other 23 hours? I would see him out in the neighborhood, and he was doing the deal. He was walking the walk. He had women friends because he treated them with dignity and respect. He had guy friends because he could be depended upon. He was reliable. He didn't lie, and he didn't try to get over on people. And you could tell that he was a guy not to be tangled with. He could get that crazy look, but he also had this serenity about him. I knew that he was doing the deal. And so then he introduced me to after the 3rd step prayer, we stood up and said, Bobby, the way we do a 3rd step, we pick paper and pen up and do a 4 steps. Oh, easy does it. Let's keep this simple. How about I just don't drink and go to a meeting? Now, I know the slogans serve a purpose, but I'm twisting around not to do the steps. I mean, I don't want to do one of these, do my inventory. I'm going to meetings. People say, I'm doing my inventory, stirring stuff up. I feel like drinking. Well, I want to eat it, stick a gun in my mouth. It's pretty safe to assume my life was unmanageable. So I did my 4th step, and it took me a while, and because I just want to finish up my experience with young people, this is not a step study, but I did the steps, and I got better. Things around me may not always got better, and there were a lot of things I was embarrassed about, but this is my experience on the steps. 1, the obsession to drink was removed. 2, the obsession to end my life was removed. 3, the obsession to end other people's lives was removed. And 4, but more importantly, I was always about pride and ego. There were a lot of things about my past that I wasn't proud of, but as a result of the steps, the 5th step, sharing it with my sponsor, the 9th step, making amends. Anybody can walk through a door and say, hey, you SOB, I remember you. But that's okay, I'm free. And that's what the steps have given me. I'm not proud of my past, but I get the steps enable me to be at peace with my past, and that was a tremendous relief. I then got involved in service, and I learned about traditions, and we start traveling, and we're going to young people. And I know there's a number of my friends that are online right now. It was funny because people used to mock us, because now we're in our 30s and we're going to young people's. And we were always the oldest young people's group. Like, we'd be going to different cities, and the bid committees, they would have 16 and 15-year-olds. And here comes Philly with us, 20, 30-year-olds. We had Eddie K with us. He was in his 40s, but he was also sober 20 plus years. He got sober when he was 20. But Trish, our friend Trish, sober many years. But we were definitely the grayest of the young peoples. But we had fun. We traveled everywhere. So I really got caught up in Icky Pie, right? And then we wanted to bring Icky Pie here to Philadelphia, and we couldn't get it. And I didn't handle it that well. You may find this hard to believe. I even got every champion. I would mock the advisory council, and that's a shame because they're just doing the best they could. So this was 1993. So my friends, it was me, it was Billy N from New York, and Billy S from Philly. So we tracked down a guy by the name of Mike Mack. Mike Mack was the man who had started Icky Pie. And the reason, back then I told you, the reason was we want to meet with them, we want to record the history. How did young people start? What was their intent? The real reason, though, why I wanted to get this and give it to the advisory council, so you guys lost your way. This is what Icky was about. So in my house in Philly, Billy, and Billy interviewed Mike Mack for several hours, and those tapes are now with Icky archives. But the great thing about it is here. So I was at Icky in Boston last year, right? For the life of me, I cannot tell you what the theme was. This was 1993. So the first Icky is 1957. Mike Mack knew, not only did he, the first 7 years, what cities the Icky was, the name of the hotel, he knew the theme, and he was not looking at notes. That's 1993, and he's going back to the late 50s, early 60s. Here it is, 2020. I can't tell you what the theme was in 2019, but Mike was great. But this is what their deal was. This is why Icky started. Young people, actually the very first young people ever is in Philadelphia. It's still here. Their official name was the 35 and under group. And once you became 36, you were allowed to go to their meetings, but you were not allowed to vote at their business meetings. Because back then AA was, let's be honest, it was mostly older white men. So not everyone was always welcome. So the 35 and under group started. So these guys wanted to come up with a conference. So they got in contact. There was a group of young people in Toronto. Dennis A was from Toronto, Mike Mack from Philly. And together, the very first Icky was in Niagara Falls, because they thought that that's the halfway point, which shows you Philadelphians aren't quite good with their geography, right? It's just like the Big People's AA, the first convention in 1950. Bill and Bob never had a crossword, but their followers really had problems with each other. And the Akron people wouldn't want to go to New York, and the New York people didn't want to go to Akron. So they decided the halfway point. They went to Cleveland. So I don't know what it is about us on the East Coast, but we're very poor in our geography. So, but the very first Icky 1957, Niagara Falls. And what Mike did while we were talking, he reached in, he had a sports jacket on, he reached into his pocket and he gave us a black and white photograph of the stage of the banner in Icky. And I'm getting goosebumps. So this is 93, right? So he's had it in his possession for at least 36 years. And the picture was in mint condition. So obviously I'm thinking, wow, Mike just gave me this picture. But I turned it in. It was tough, but I did turn it in. So, but we had fun at Icky. We were traveling. And I need to tell you, so I got invited to speak at conferences. So I'm going to give you a little pointer. If you have a resentment against a particular conference and you like to see it end, invite me, because I have experience in killing conferences. There are a bunch of conferences. I was their last speaker. I understand Dale was telling me you guys are thinking about bringing back Icky, right? I spoke at Icky. We did it in South Bend. I was in Hawaii, Icky in 95. I was the breakfast speaker. I was the last breakfast speaker. They haven't had a breakfast speaker since, on Friday mornings, breakfast speaker. At Icky in D.C., I was the men's speaker. We stopped the men's meetings. We did away with that. Kentucky young people, Kickipa, me and my friend John H., we were the last speakers. John was Friday, I was Saturday night. That was the last Kickipa. I can't tell you how many conferences we went to that we just killed. But it didn't matter if there were 200 people or 5,000 people. I personally kind of liked the smaller conferences because for me, it was easy to get lost in crowds, So I need to tell you, as much as I love Icky, and I still do, and I like going just to get caught up and seeing friends. And it's amazing. You haven't seen people maybe year to year, but if they dropped off, I need to tell you, for years, it was hard for me to miss an Icky only because out of ego, because I was saying, I was at 20 straight Icky I was at 21 straight Icky And I remember the year that I missed because I had some health problems. It was difficult, but you know what? Icky went on. I thought Icky was going to fail without me. So, but Glerky was my favorite young people. I loved the Great Lake Regional Conference of Young People in AA. It was such a great conference. So I got a funny story. Glerky is held in Indianapolis. I forget the years. It was in the 90s. I was supposed to be the Sunday morning speaker, the spiritual speaker. It shows you that they didn't listen to the tape. However, so me and Billy from Philly, we catch a flight. We're going from Philly to Newark, then Newark on to Indianapolis. So we get up to Newark, and we were supposed to meet our friend Steve C. from DC. You can't make this stuff up. So Billy and I are walking through the airport, and it was funny. In Newark Airport, they had a meditation room, not a chapel. I've seen some chapels in airports, but a meditation room. And Billy said, "Wow, check that out." He said, "You want to go in?" I says, "Nah, I'm hungry. Let's go get something to eat." So we go, and we order a couple sandwiches, and it's taken a while. This is all prior to 9/11. This is when you can act up at an airport without getting arrested. So this is the mid-'90s. So I tell Billy, "No, go ahead. You go to the gate. Tell Steve we'll be there. I'll get your sandwich. We'll be there." It's taken forever to get my sandwich. Unbelievable. So I'm not the most patient person. I mean, I have lots of character defects, but I'm not the most patient person. So I finally get disgusted. I said, "Listen, man, if this is taking forever, I need my money back. Right now, I need to tell you, I'm the only person in line, and there's only one person behind the counter." He says, "Okay, meet me down at the cash register." I said, I go down. There's the cash register. There's actually two of them. He says, "Can I help you?" And I say, "Are you kidding? Like, we just had this conversation 5 seconds ago." So through gritted teeth, I said, "Yes. Now you ordered my sandwich. My flight's about to leave. I need my money back." So because I'm arrogant and nasty, I now impact others. He said, "Well, sir, can you tell me which register you ordered from?" And there were two registers. I said, "Oh, you ordered from that one." He said, "I'm sorry, sir, but he's on break. You'll have to wait for him to come back." I said, "Oh, really? If I could wait from, yeah, right. I thought, really? That's what, yeah." He said, "Yes, sir, that's what you have to do." I said, "Okay." Now I'm on my way to be the spiritual speaker. You can't forget that. I reached over the cash register, and I grabbed the keys out of the cash register, and I saw it running through the airport with the keys in my hand. I don't know why I did that. And I realized as I'm running, I'm an idiot, but what are you going to do, right? So I actually see a trash can, and I threw the keys in the trash can, and I keep running. Well, another passenger in the airport said, "Yo, buddy, that guy, there's this short guy. He's behind me trucking. He's after me." God forbid he'd had a heart attack, and then I get charged with that. So we get to the gate, and they've almost completed the boarding process. It's still somewhat open, but everyone else is gone. So I bull my way. I get onto past the agent, show her the ticket. I get on the plane. I sit down, and Billy. So it's me, Billy, and Steve C. And Billy turns to me. He says, "Bobby, where's my sandwich?" I turn around and say, "You know what, Billy? F you and F that sandwich." Now, Steve C. has never heard me. He thinks I'm a pretty decent guy, so he's shocked by my language. And he just looks at me stunned. So I'm looking for the cops to come on, and the gate closes, the plane takes off. And so when we're in the air, I tell these guys the story. And so I'm going off, right? I'm going to write, it was Ogo Pond was the restaurant. I'm going to write them a letter, and I want my money back. And then Billy says, "Well, Bobby, where in that letter you're going to say that you stole the keys from the cash register?" It's just nuts. So I actually shared that story from the podium Sunday morning because, believe me, I'm the type of guy to get caught up in my headlines. "Oh, Bobby, cool, yeah. But I need to let people know how much an idiot I was, So, and then Glarky-Pa, unfortunately, died. And it died in Philadelphia. And I'm still embarrassed about this years later. So Glarky-Pa, the Great Lake Regional Conference of Young People in AA, the guideline for Glarky-Pa, you needed to be a state that bordered a Great Lake. So Pennsylvania kind of meets the requirement. If you live in Erie, that's where Lake Erie is, borders, Great Lake. I'm sure when those guys came up with their bylaws, when they did, they could have come up with 100 cities. I'm sure Philadelphia was not on that 100 cities, but these were in great communities. I mean, we were in Kalamazoo, and we were in Syracuse, and we were in South Bend, and I just loved it. And I think what had happened, we did it in Chicago. Glarky-Pa in Chicago was I was the voice. Believe that they had to bring me with my slight regional accent. I guess they didn't have anyone in the Midwest with that flat nasal tone. So I'm the voice of the conference. It was a great conference, but I think what had happened, everyone wanted to replicate that. They wanted Glarky-Pa to be Icky-Pa, and that's a shame. So Erie was at Glarky-Pa, and they presented a bid. They had a real bid. And the advisory council didn't give it to them. And a couple guys from Philly, as a joke, they stood up and said, yeah, well, we'll host it. It was like a token bid. Here's a committee. He came and busted their rear end, did all the work, and they didn't get the conference. And a token bid because they now want to go to a big city. And so in Philadelphia, under the banner of Glurkipa, that weekend, they created ECPA. And no offense if anyone's on who's associated with ECPA, I just thought that they should at least have waited a year, because what they did, they took action that harmed other groups. And, and we don't do that in the Ford tradition. We're supposed to talk to other people, And then ECPA, them Philly, Boston, Baltimore, they just want to do big cities. And I was afraid that the smaller communities were going to miss out on their regional YPAs, Now we have these big ECPA, Wacky Pa, and it's like, well, where are the smaller ones? So when I had heard that you guys in Indiana were thinking about bringing Inky Pa back, I think that's pretty cool. You don't need to have 2,000 people at a conference to consider it a success. You need to be able to be financially secure and pay your bills. And when you leave the hotel that Sunday morning, you don't know anyone dying. But if you've only had 300 people, that's cool. Don't be impressed by the numbers, and that's just my experience with that. So I'll shoot it off that bandwagon. No, sorry. So if anyone's online, if my friend Billy S. is on, I know his wife is. Billy is one of those guys who helped kill Gorky Pop. Billy, I forgive you. I no longer have a resentment. So, but again, Icky Pop last year, I need to tell you, I spent most of my time in the lobby, in the hotel lobby. Me and my friend Josie from Worcester, we just, people were coming and going, and it's amazing. People that you only may see once a year, or every few years, but that connection is there, So fast forward, I get invited to speak at the Arizona State Convention. It's my 50th birthday, and I have a very difficult time because I'm comparing myself to other people. Never married, no children. And even though I was doing fine with my career, I want to back up a little bit. I did go back to school, I guess, for you young people. At the age of 34, I pledged a fraternity, sober. That was, Sigma Phi Epsilon, Sigma. It was a blast. Yeah, I'll give you my number afterwards. That's a long story. I'll tell you about it afterwards. But I pledged a fraternity sober. I called them up. I felt like Bill Wilson at the Mayflower Hotel. They had all these rush flyers, and I called these people. I said, I'm 34 years old. I was a cop. I don't drink. Can I join your fraternity? Click, click. They all hung up on me. The last fraternity I called, and I think I piqued their interest. And they said, why don't you come on over? And I went over, and they allowed me to join. So, it was just crazy. So here I am. I'm 50. I'm at the Arizona State Convention. My friend Billy's there, and we're talking. And on my 50th, on September 6th, I had a tough day. September 7th, I was okay. I was kind of accepted the reality that I won't marry, I won't have kids, but on the 6th, I was just, I was full of self-pity. The 7th, I was okay. The old adage, want to find out God has a sense of humor? Tell him your plans. So I had dated someone previously, Libby from Omaha. I had met her. In 2002 at the Cornhusker Roundup. We had a whirlwind romance for about a year, and I ended it like an idiot. But the reason I ended it is because I still had a lot of issues. Double digits of years of sobriety, especially with women. And I was very shallow. And so long distance was okay with me because there's no intimacy in the long distance. There's safety in the distance. So I was getting a little scared. And then I said, well, she'll never move to the East Coast. And, and if she does, they'll chew her up. So I ended it. And I remember when I told her, and she said, Bobby, because I said, well, you're never going to move to Philly and blah, blah, blah. And she said, to be honest, that was my decision to make. She handled it with dignity and grace. And I would see her frequently because my sponsor at the time, Dick Martin, he was alive. Dick lived in Bellevue. So I would see Dick. I would go back to Nebraska a couple of times a year. And I was either dating someone or Libby was dating someone. So in 2010, again, true story, a conference in Omaha called Luck of the Irish. And my friend Billy was going to be one of the speakers, but Billy was also on the board, and that was a board weekend, so Billy couldn't go, and I pitched it for him. So I go to this meeting, I go to this conference, and Libby is the Thursday night speaker. And she knocked it out of the park. She was just awesome. And I went up to her afterwards, and even though like I made amends to her, but I went through the line, and I told her, I said, you know what, I'm truly sorry the way I treated you, and I wish you nothing but the best. So they had a speaker, they had a dinner for the speakers, right? And so she had a boyfriend, and her boyfriend didn't come. Now that's, if you guys are jealous, please work on that, because that jealousy is a horrible character defect. But whatever, I benefited from it. So we're just flirting back and forth, and nothing disrespectful. I said, well, the International's in San Antonio. You want to go to that? She said, I don't know, the crowds, I haven't registered. I said, well, you can come with me. And she looked at me, she said, yeah, right. No, I don't think so. So this is March of 2010. The very next month, I get a call. I'm going out to Orange County for a conference. It's Easter weekend. And Libby calls me up, and she said, listen, David and I just broke up. I said, I'm sorry to hear that, honey. And she said, I need to get out of town. Can I come to Philly this weekend? I said, I'm going out to Orange County. I'd be more than happy to fly out there. We can hang out. And then she said, no sex. Don't do anything stupid. I need to get out of town. And I am embarrassed to tell you, at this point, I'm 49 years old. It is probably the first time in my life, sober, over 20 plus years, it is the first time in my life that I've actually listened to somebody else. And I can tell that she was in pain. So we hung out in Orange County. We had a great weekend. And then the night before we left, I said, listen, I need to tell you that I want to marry you. Now, this is not like a typical AA, like you date and you get married a week later. I said, no, I want to date you, do it the right way. And she said, don't talk nonsense like that. And the next day, as I was driving her to the airport, she said, listen, if we get married, I'm not going to get married in the church. I'm going to get married on the beach. I said, okay. So that's April of 2010. And, we date for almost 9 months before there's any physical contact, because we already knew how to do that, And she actually came to Philly that summer to live. She came here probably about 4 weeks, in the summer, just to get used to Philly, to see could she really make it here, because the city, we pride ourselves on being rude, right? She moved back home. We got engaged, and in November of 2011, at the age of 51, I got married. And I need to tell you, I love being married. Getting married has been the best thing besides getting sober. And I'm glad I has waited as long as I did, because if I did it one day sooner, I would have blown. And so married, and life is good. And then last year, and I've had a lot of physical problems, cancer a couple times. And, she at first said she didn't want to have children. And then she told me a couple years ago, like that child. And because she moved here, and I need to tell you, she's 20 years younger than me. So now she's hanging out with women her age. All these girls are having babies. She said, Bobby, I like that baby. I said, okay. You reserve the right to change your mind. And however, we're not successful. And I figured it had to be me. The age, my cancer, and I just thought it had to be me. So I went to the doctor a little over a year ago. He says, you cannot have children. He said, not the natural method. If you want to try other things. I told my wife, she wasn't interested. Okay, fair enough. So last year, September, right? Not last year, 10 months ago. September, I come home. I'm 59 years old. I come home, and she tells me she's pregnant. I said, really? I was stunned, but we were excited, and God is good, and we go through all the testing, and, and she's in her second trimester, and we have a miscarriage right before Christmas, and it was very difficult. It was just a very difficult time, and I wasn't angry. People said I was just sad, like really deeply sad. And, the past couple of years, my best friend died 3 years ago, my dad 2 years ago, and I was just getting all this grief. And the program helped. I mean, it saved my ass from drinking. But then I needed to go to get some little professional counseling just to help with the grief process, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, you know, I just say that because I've seen some men and women go through some terrible things for their own, and they got through it one day at a time without picking up a drink. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous promises. It's life on life terms. And let's face it, it's an ugly, unjust world out there. But we don't need to use that as an excuse to make a drink, to have a drink. I mean, this whole thing, my friend Faye's online. So we were in Narassa, I guess almost 20 years ago. She reminded me right after this pandemic started. There was a discussion on electronic meetings. I said, BS, that's not AA, being open-minded, right? And so I had forgot that discussion. She had sent me a text earlier and reminded me of it. And so when the crisis, so in Philly, this past Tuesday was the start of our 8th week. We're in lockdown now through June 4th. So for the first week, Libby, she says, you're going to do the Zoom meetings? I said, no, I'm not doing that. But then the second week, I was getting a bit goofy, so I did the Zoom meetings. I only did my home group 3 times a week. And she said, don't you want to check out the other meetings? I says, no. I felt like a voyeur. Like I said, why would I go there? But then I started doing it. And I now love these Zoom meetings. And for the guys who put this together, and I really believe that Bob and Bill are tickled pink. I always think when I'm at the International and when we say the prayer Saturday night, the flag ceremony, and I think they're looking down on us and they're just tickled pink to what's going on. They have to be overwhelmed what's going on now. That through this technology, AA survives anything. When calamity, it's funny, what's the line in the book? Meet calamity with serenity, and when things happen, like, let me tell you about my bad luck with Hickey Pop. New Orleans, Katrina, I was the Friday night speaker before Katrina hit. So it goes back to my bad luck with young people. And so that got canceled because they had a little rain. But you know what? I mean, here their community was devastated and AA survived. In New York City on 9/11, there were groups that were just devastated. But then they start AA at ground zero. So I'm just amazed that AA survives. But Bill Wilson says it'd be arrogant to think that AA be around forever. He talks about how sometimes the good is the enemy of the best, As long as I do my part, and that's what I'm responsible. I'm responsible for my part, I love being sober. I'm glad I got so. I think getting sober at any age is a blessing. To get sober at a younger age is double blessing. Not everyone needs to get divorced, go to jail, or whatever. Whether other substances raise the bottoms, I don't care. If you said that you've had enough, you've had enough. And I'm okay with that. And I support you, whether you're 15 or 45. So if you're new, I wish you well. Get a home group, get a sponsor. Make sure your sponsor has done the steps. If he or she has not done the steps, he or she has no business sponsoring you. How do you find out they did the steps? You ask them. You will hear 2 things, either yes or no. The person says yes, that's your person. He or she takes you under their wing. You get the experience. You become a sponsor. You take someone underneath your wings. It's been working that way since June 10th of 1935. I think I've spoke long enough. Thank you very much. I plan on being at Icky Pod, New Orleans. If there's going to be another Y Pod before that, who knows? And who knows with New Orleans what's going to happen, whether we do it virtually or not. But if you haven't been to a Y Pod conference, please go. I think you'll have it's an experience that should not be missed. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Awesome, Bob.